Thank you for joining us tonight. The Smith County Sheriff is defending a directive telling his employees to not speak with a certain county commissioner, specifically about the business of the sheriff's office, something the commissioner says prevents her from doing her job effectively. Tonight, KLTV 7 investigates. February 14th. Sheriff Larry Smith issues this directive telling employees they are to not answer any questions from Commissioner Christina Drewry about the sheriff's office. Instead, they are to forward her questions to the sheriff or his secretary. Failure to do so could result in termination.
And just imagine if you have 400 employees and you speak with 400 different voices in a paramilitary type organization. And what I mean by that is there's a chain of command. There's sergeants, there's lieutenants, there's captains, there's chief deputies, and there's myself. That is there in place for a reason.
Drewry still has access to the sheriff, 3 chief deputies, and the environmental crimes unit. Important because commissioners take calls about roadside trash and dumping in their precincts. But Drewry says the directive singling her out prevents her from doing her job.
I'm not asking questions about cases or specifics and how they investigate things. I'm looking into the budgetary end.
The directive was issued the same week as this testy exchange in Commissioner's Court, in which Drewry asked the sheriff about whether or not his office complied with federal policy when it comes to immigration, related to a body armor grant that required compliance.
I've been complying with the law for 12 years. I've been sheriff. I'm not going to not comply with the law as I know it. So I'm ready for any question.
Yes, sir. And I'm not disrespecting you. I absolutely respect you in the office that you're in. I had to ask questions. That's my job. Because the problem is, on the grant, if we aren't complying with DHS policy, then the county has to refund that money to the state, the office of the governor, and that's $100,000 plus.
The sheriff told Drewry in court his office follows the law and was in compliance. The directive to sheriff's office employees was issued a few days later.
Is there anything illegal about this?
Illegal about what?
About the order itself.
Oh, absolutely not.
District Attorney Jacob Putman agrees, telling Drewry and KLTV he does not believe the directive is illegal. Sheriff Smith says it's in line with department policy and still gives Drewry access to his command staff.
Between them and myself, I think we can answer any question that the commissioner or any other commissioner might have. The other 4 have been completely satisfied up until now, as far as I know.
We spoke by phone with 2 other county commissioners who told us they've never had trouble accessing information from the sheriff's office needed to do their jobs effectively.
It's not a sheriff's department, it's a sheriff's office. And what that means is the sheriff's office is a constitutional office that answers to the people. We don't answer to any entity within the county. They do our budget.
If I can't ask questions and find out what's going on inside the office, the inefficiencies that are there, the roadblocks, the issues, then I can't effectively do county business.
Now, we did reach out this afternoon to the county judge for comment on this matter. A county spokesperson told us he had no comment.